Hi.
Hi.
All right, we're on. I'm waving to my brother. My brother just jumped on too. um, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk. This is going to be short and sweet, and the purpose is to learn from you and how you've helped your son navigate his journey. So, the first question is, to whatever extent you're comfortable, please share what your child's journey is in terms of symptoms or diagnosis, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Okay. Um, excuse me. So, my son is 13, and from the outside, he looks like a pretty typical, cute blonde boy with a bright smile and fun personality. And he was like the easiest, best baby, super charming, loved everybody. All the daycare workers liked him and everything. And still about until about like 2, then he started biting. So, biter moms, I feel you if you're going through that. It is a horrible spot to be in. But then we just kind of noticed that he was having problems like regulating his behavior and responding to things that were right, and how to kind of just defend himself properly. And throughout school, he was busy. He had a hard time sitting in his chair. I remember the kindergarten teacher kind of pulled us aside afterwards and was like, I think you need to kind of look into some stuff. And I thought, okay, they're going to try and test him or something. But she just wanted us to do like family counseling, which we did. And, gave us some supports at home to try and create structure and boundaries and discipline and things like that for him. And about second or third grade is when his differences were noticeable. And he's very, very impulsive. If he thinks something, he says it, he does it. He has a really hard time like self-monitoring. And we started to look into getting him tested for ADHD. And we were living in Southern California then. Kaiser makes you kind of like go through all these different classes so that the parents are informed. And so you have some tools and resources besides just medication right off the bat, and those helped. And the doctor also handed me a piece of paper that said, here, your son has ADHD, this is a 504, go walk it into your school and they can help you. I said, okay. So I literally took it straight to the school and handed it to the desk and said, my son has ADHD, this is a 504, I was supposed to bring it to you. And they said, okay, thanks. And since then there's just been struggles with schooling primarily. He's an eloper, so he would run away from campus when he got kind of cornered or felt uncomfortable. I found him like 2 miles from campus one time. So yeah, I homeschooled him for a year and a half while we got an IEP done, because the school kept kind of reassuring me, no, he's fine. He doesn't need an IEP. Like, he's not behind in grades, so he's fine. But meanwhile, he's running off of campus and things like that. So didn't have some
Yeah.
support in place. Homeschooled him a year and a half, got a good IEP through our homeschool, and then returned him. And he's had many different kind of school situations, really restrictive, non-restrictive, and one-on-one aid. And he's 13. We have just kind of now finally found a really good situation for him. And
So, so would you, it sounds like you got a diagnosis a couple of years after the first, would you call it a symptom or the first signs or something from daycare?
yeah,
Do you,
hard because having him look normal and pretty much behave
yeah,
typically, I as a parent had a really hard time, like, what is the level that is extra? And I talk to parents now and I said, okay, if you look at your kid and in their class, would you say half of the kids struggle at the same level your child does? Then it's probably pretty typical. Is it just him? So it's like I didn't have the right lens to look at the problem. And then I think, having other children and just like being busy parents and all of the things that we had going on, we just didn't really feel like we had the tools to support him, assess
right.
him. Got older, it was like a spiraling out of control kind of situation.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, one of the things that we learned is that most kids that could benefit from like immediate care or therapies or services actually don't get it, in part
Yeah.
because as parents, we don't know what to look for.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like a first child or something, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're just told that this is normal. What's the
Or I
what's the
was a
advice you give?
bad parent, like that's, I think, how I was perceived by my peers and how I felt
Really?
that I didn't have control over him or something like that.
That's so hard. It's like that's not the case. That's not
Yeah,
the case at
yeah,
all, right?
yeah.
And I see that in parenting culture now too. Like I know of a child who's struggling, and luckily I think people are now more attuned to being more child-centered rather than being like, what's wrong with that child? But
Mm-hmm.
I feel always so protective of this child that I barely know, because it's like, well, the child needs something,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and it's not anyone's fault, right? We have to get
yeah.
out of this idea that it's someone's fault, right? To really focus on the child.
Mhm.
Um, what advice do you give to parents like you whose child,
I think
whatever, who have
the
questions?
guilt and blame and kind of we go through the steps of grief when you have a child with special needs, right? And all those different steps. And so one of them is like, as I'm not pointing blame to anything, I wish I had been more assertive when he was little with his education. I really liked our school. I really trusted what they had to tell me. Um, I thought when I turned in that paper that somehow he had supports and I didn't know the protocol or the system. I should have demanded him. He was tested for an IEP way earlier. I mean, we got it in like third grade or fourth grade, and he was having issues starting in kindergarten. And it wasn't because he wasn't smart or intellectual. It was because there's so many other supports, and having ADHD, they can qualify under OHI, which is other health impairment. Um, there's like a little bit of a loophole there. And I didn't know what the tools were. I didn't know how to assert myself better. I work in special needs now, and have before. If my son had like early intervention, I don't think we'd be in our position at all. And that's a 4-year-old. And
That's
great,
so interesting. Why is that? Because you
because
think the behavioral aspects would have been addressed earlier?
correct. And just that
Okay.
like kind of redirection before, I feel like with ADHD, the older they get, the more all of that like rejection, dysmorphia, and all these other things really start to become heavily, it starts out like once a day, and then it starts out once an hour, and then it's like once a 10-minute. Like if we had just had the tools when he was really, really little, that, you know, we might be in a different place right now. Just that kind of like redirection
Yeah.
and that development. And, he never qualified for like ABA therapy or anything because he's not on the spectrum. And,
Uh,
you know, if there was perhaps more supports in place for someone like him, we would be probably a little bit off right now. And I wish
is yeah.
I were assertive with the school to get him tested like that.
Is there something in the medical system that a parent could do early too? Like, could they? There's a school that you can push for an evaluation, but is there something they can do with their doctors to push for answers?
I actually went through the doctor, not the school district, when I
Okay.
got originally diagnosed. The school district was just kind of, like I said, pushing back, like, oh, he doesn't need it. And I just wasn't feeling satisfied I was getting results fast enough. So I do encourage other families that I meet, like, don't, I would say do both, but you don't have to wait for the school. I would have that conversation with your medical professional soon.
Okay.
I do feel like I've learned more on Instagram about my child's diagnosis than I have in a doctor's office. I think there's a lot to be learned and shared still about ADHD. And I think that's why so many parents are surfacing, trying to find tools and support and like learn, because I'm 40, but when we were kids, ADHD wasn't really a thing. It was ADD. And I had a completely different, mindset of what this was. And it's emotional, it's conditional. It's not just tapping your knee in a chair, so
Yeah. Can you name a few accounts off the top of your head that you might know that are good accounts on Instagram for people to
um,
follow, if you remember them?
I think like for magazine, there's a couple I follow. I can probably link them to you. I feel like if you just look on Instagram and ADHD, you'll see multiple. And I would say just look and see what resonates with you. There's a lot that kind of have, guys that act out kind of certain symptoms or behaviors of ADHD that we don't even realize we have. I know women get diagnosed between like 30 and 40
Yeah.
with ADHD, which I thought women and men are completely different. There's just a lot to learn, and I try and just absorb what I can so I can teach others and help
Yeah.
support myself.
Yeah. Are there one of the things that we're trying to do at Sleuth is make the exchange of information between parents more data backed so that the information that you get has, kind of like analysis behind it, right? Like I'm on several diagnosis groups, and sometimes the information I get, I don't know if it pertains to my child or not. How do you sift through information to know if that's relevant for your child and like how to take it to a doctor? Like, and how do you help other parents navigate where they are and where they should be? Because, like, for example, there might be certain types of specialists that people are saying are really good for
Yeah.
children with ADHD, but then it might not actually. Like, I have lots of stories about that when it comes to feeding therapy, which is more what I know about. It's like some feeding programs are good and some feeding programs are bad, depending on the child.
Right.
How do you kind of sift through that to make decisions about what's okay for your son?
I feel like a mother's instinct is huge, and I think at the end of the day, the first thing actually should be just, are you treated with respect, and are you and your child valued when you're sitting in front of that doctor's office? It's like we've gone through so many, and going through your generic like pediatrician. I feel like is it developmental pediatrician that you would deal with like ADHD and autism spectrum and stuff like that. They just look at the child differently, and they have different solutions. I've gone to several psychiatrists and stuff as well, and they all have kind of a different facet to them and how they approach medicine and how they approach helping your child. I felt like the developmental pediatrician was the person that most valued like us as a family and like supporting him, and yes, introducing medication, but kind of looking at all aspects of it versus the other two. I think that for, sifting through information and stuff, I just see what resonates. Like, oh yeah, I think more than anything, people want to feel like me too, right? Like when I meet parents at my work and they're kind of telling me about their kiddo and this is what you can expect, I kind of put my hand on the shoulder and I'm like, I understand. I deal with that with my son too, and like you see their guard drop a little bit, that they don't have to like
Yeah,
explain, you know, um, stuff that's not fun to talk about, like the
no,
imperfections or something. Like it's really hard for us parents to kind of like have to continually walk through that. And
yeah.
so,
I think there's also this obsession with like performance,
yeah,
right? Even kids' performance and, what are your kids doing? Or like, how good are they at this or at this or at this? And so, like, it makes it hard to talk about these things. Whereas it's like children are humans with bodies and needs. It's fully normal. If we can talk
yeah,
about what we need, of course, we should be able to talk about that with children.
yeah.
So it sounds like if you had to name the top three experts that most helped you said one was a developmental pediatrician. Who are the other people in your world that have been the most helpful to get your son what helps, like what he needs in order to thrive?
I would say we hired an advocate for our education.
Oh,
After we kind of went, because we found out that like he didn't have a 504. There was a whole protocol, and when they accepted that paper, in my mind I thought I had checked the blocks off, and then they sent me paperwork and I was like, what is going on? I felt very lost in the
yeah.
whole realm of it.
Can you
And when
talk about how you found an advocate? Where would
um,
someone start?
it was a friend of a friend, and I
Okay.
had several like within back in that community we were living in. I think at one of the daycares there was like a grandma dropping off, and she had handed me a card. I love like mom groups on Facebook.
Hmm.
I feel like you can go in there and ask for anything and get great referrals. And again, just, call them all, check out their website, see who you
Yeah.
like, what resonates with you, and who you feel comfortable with, because this is a really like vulnerable, sacred space that you're having to invite these people into. But having an advocate that was able to review our IEP and before we even started the IEP, she helped me write the letter and how I'm going to request it and what's the laws that I didn't know about, and I was trusting my school to like help me, and they weren't.
Yeah.
They were taking advantage of my lack of knowledge is how I felt.
Yeah.
So I getting an advocate, or at least finding someone, a friend, a mom friend, someone in a group, special needs parent group or something, they can all kind of help steer you the right direction. I felt like that was huge. And
Yeah.
now I absolutely adore my son's special needs teacher. We moved out of state. We are living someplace else, and I was really worried about him kind of going to like a typical junior high because he's going to transfer classes. And she's fabulous, and I feel like she's not just making sure he goes to school and finishes his science, but like she's actually helping me raise my human, and
That's amazing.
that's huge, finding it's not going to be every year you have a great teacher, but when you do find
Right.
those and allowing them in to do the work with you.
Yeah. Yeah. What, and anyone else on the team that you feel like has been invaluable?
That's kind of, like I said, we kind of bounced around from different schools and finding the right setting and stuff. And
Yeah.
a lot of frustrations with trying to get him therapy and counseling, and tried many
Hmm.
things and couldn't find a fit. And I felt a little bit lost in that realm. So I kind of put that, close
Yeah.
that chapter for a minute. And we're now kind of starting to see if we can revisit it, because he's 13 and he's hormonal. I want to revisit the idea of medication again, because it wasn't a good fit. It was like, try this, try this, try this. And it was,
Yeah. It's a lot of
that,
experimentation.
and it's horrible for everyone.
Yeah.
Like we have an appointment next week with someplace local that a mom at church told me about. And I guess they swab their cheek, and it kind of
Oh,
tells them
interesting.
medications are best for them. I'm like, why isn't everybody doing that? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
you
Let me know what you think of that. That's interesting.
versus like, let's try 5 different kinds and hope your kid responds well. It's just a
Yeah.
long. So
Well,
that is,
something you said I think is interesting. It's like it's almost like the permission to stop something that's not working for a little bit,
yeah,
right? And like that decision is yours as a parent. It's a really
yeah,
hard decision to make, right? Like
yeah,
you're probably hearing. So I just want to say I am inspired by that because, in our there's often times with my daughter that I'm like, she has too much therapy. I just need to stop this for a while. And that's what
yeah,
we're going to do this summer is like give her a break.
yeah.
Um, and you're the only one who can, you in consultation with your child now that he's 13. I have a very small child. So I just want to say I commend you for that because that's hard.
It is hard.
Um, yeah. One of the questions we get, and I see a lot, is should I move in order to get better services for my child? Can you talk a little bit about your experience moving from California to where you are now and how that might have, in terms of services, what that looks like, the difference in the support that you got?
It's such a hard decision because, obviously moving out of state is a huge family decision. But then, I mean, the biggest like component was like, okay, what are we going to do for Max? Like, what's that even
Hmm.
going to look like? And I was really worried, going from California, that you think is on top of everything and going to be the most progressive or advanced, and coming to a little state of Idaho, where you think, could they possibly be up to speed? And I think, I was really, really nervous about, he was in a very restrictive school. It's called an NPS, a non-public school. So when the school can't meet your child's needs and keep him safe, they have to find an alternative. So it was basically like a lockdown facility because he was an eloper
Mm.
and stuff. Very, very regimented. They had a behavior interventionist in the classroom, and very small class sizes. Um, Sometimes that worked out well for him, but a lot of times, like, he hated it and it was horrible for
Yeah.
him. But as a parent, I just wanted him to get the behavior support he needed and to know that he was safe and he wasn't leaving campus. And so we had to make that hard decision back in California. And then we come to, preparing to move to Idaho, and I'm trying to talk to the district representative or whatever and kind of explain to her. And she was just fantastic. Like, she went
Mm.
above and beyond to kind of talk to the old team and talk to the teachers. And, she's, and let me feel like I was a part of the process with the schools. Up here in Idaho, there's a lot of schools. There's like your district schools, there's charter schools, there's private schools, there's Christians. Like, there's, the choices are kind of overwhelming for such a small space, how many options there are. Um, and that gal that was from the district was very like, look, I think this is the right place for Max. I like this teacher, she's more seasoned, and this other school is newer, and a newer teacher, and she just got 4 students, so I wanted to send Max here. And so she pulled to get him out of zone and get him bussed and all this other stuff. And he's been, like, as he says, Mom, I'm thriving in Idaho. He absolutely loves it.
Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what he says about himself, like, and his journey? Because I
Yeah.
think I think it's so important at that age, right? He's
It,
so aware.
he's extremely social. He lacks
Mm-hmm.
all the skills. And so,
Yep.
the response is when you're kind of constantly redirected and corrected, and people get angry at you because you're not sitting down, you're not being quiet, you're obsessing over a topic. And my son has really salty language, so teachers and things like that. You kind of have a really poor self image of yourself. And so he's going someplace where he's given the freedoms to go from class to class. I about had a heart attack when they told me he was going to be, shuffling through a junior high. It's all indoors here, like a typical student. And he was going to go to like regular ed classes. He's in a regular ed science class and he's getting an A. And I'm like, what?
That's
Like,
amazing.
he
Yeah.
never did anything before. So, having this straight A record, he's totally messed up. Like, he's not perfect by any means, but it's like leaps and bounds above what he was able to do before. And
Yeah.
that, right? He knows that he's respected by his teacher, that she's going to hold him accountable, but she's going to treat him, he got in trouble for having his phone. And I was like, that's it, no phone. She's like, no, Lauren, like every other kid gets a phone. And if they bring it out in class, they lose it and go to detention. Like Max is no different. And I was like, okay. Like she's trying to teach him
Yeah.
natural consequences that every other 13-year-old's learning, and
Yeah.
he's learning them, but he's also just feeling confident in himself. He's got friends in his special needs class and friends in his other classes. And he, like, literally today, I said, I have to pick you up early. Grandparents are coming in town. He's like, do I have to leave school early, Mom? Like who is
You
this
must
kid?
have been so happy to
Yeah.
hear that. That must
Yeah.
be huge.
Say, like,
That must be huge.
I'm thriving, is that's his word he uses. And
That's
for
amazing.
being so difficult and not feeling like I had anybody to kind of walk alongside this with. I think that's why I try so hard to help other parents that I kind of see starting
Yeah.
out journey with ADHD. It's isolating and it's lonely and
Yeah.
it's angry, it's sad, and it's desperate. Like, the gambling you try and do to like help your child cope, and you lose your friends and families pull away, and it's been a really long 13-year journey. Your circle's small, and to
Yeah.
see him thriving, that's huge.
Yeah. Everything you say, I totally understand. My child has something very different, but it's lonely,
It's so,
and like you're fighting all the time, even when it looks like you're not fighting, right?
yeah,
It's like your brain is always working, it's always researching, it's always planning the conversations you're going to have with someone in your head so that like you're
yeah,
ensuring that you're on top of your game,
yeah.
so
Parents,
um
we're constantly in fight or flight mode. We have the highest divorce rate, we have the highest like cancer rate, like we're self-imploding.
you're
It's
talking about special needs parents
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
That's awesome. Gosh.
Go team, we'll be fine.
Yeah. My last question is, I never know how to ask it, but like, how do you just make sure that you're okay yourself? Like, I see that, I see on your Instagram profiles there are things that bring you joy, obviously, including your kids, obviously, but like, how do you kind of balance it all, for lack of a better phrase? A phrase I don't like very much, but you know what I mean?
I do. Your attitude is everything. It doesn't mean there's not really hard days and really hard moments where I get in my car and cry and curse and
Yeah.
yell. But all I have is my attitude, right? And like, I have faith, and I believe God chose me for him and him for me. And we're going to get through this. I just started a support group at work for parents and for special needs parents. And that's just such an amazing place for me to be, to see like community, and all we want to know is that we're not alone in our struggles, and
Yeah.
that
Right.
wake up, days are bad and you just go to bed and the next day you try again.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I always think I was like, you want to not feel alone, and you want someone to like bear witness to it without,
yeah,
like, create space and bear witness without judgment, without jumping in with a solution, and just
yeah,
see it, right, in your
yeah.
wholeness. Um, Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing all of this, and I can't wait to share it out to more people. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
help. I mean, I love being friends, and I can try and get you some of those resources and
Yeah,
things that
that'd be
just
great.
bring tools, and
Yeah.
confidence and stuff. I appreciate what you're doing so much. I saw it. I was
Thank
like,
you.
pick me, you know, I think
Yeah,
it's great.
I'm loving having you. Yeah, and
We
if
all
there's
life
anyone else,
craft.
yeah, yeah, I would love to do this with as many parents as we can. So we welcome
Yes.
anyone who's open to sharing their journey with other parents. So thank you
Uh,
for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
we'll
Have a
talk
great
soon.
rest of your day.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.